This is yet another episode of the Career Talks by Welcome Solutions. And in these meetings, we talk with professionals who have interesting career paths and who are willing to share their life hacks with us. And today, I have a great pleasure to introduce Dr. Manolo Castellano. Manolo is a career consultant and talent recruiter. After obtaining his PhD in neurobiology at the Universidad de Sevilla in Spain in 2006, he moved to the USA, where he focused his research on auditory synaptic physiology at the Rockefeller University and Stanford University. Back in Europe, he worked at the Universidad Miguel Hernández in Elche, applying electrophysiological techniques to the study of pancreatic cell physiology and diabetes. In 2017, he transitioned to science consulting, founding Carreras Científicas Alternativas, a platform devoted to guide scientists and researchers to find new professional paths. Manolo conducts training seminars and workshops related to professional careers, participates frequently in employability forums, and runs a podcast about scientific careers, where he interviews researchers who happily made their professional career transition beyond academia. Manolo currently combines his career guiding activities with recruitment consulting for R&D companies at Talento Científico. Welcome, Manolo. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm glad to see you finally in person. I'm looking forward to hearing your story told from your own perspective.
Thank you, Natalia. It's a great pleasure to be here today with you and your audience.
Like, what do you think were the milestones in your career so far, and the most memorable turns and happenings, events that influenced you the most so far, and which which parts of your career were the most memorable and influential for you so far?
Oh, that's a long story, Natalia. Okay, so I will start with the beginning of my career, and that's the typical story of a researcher, right? I studied in Seville, in Spain. I did my master was biology, and I'm more specialized in molecular genetics. And then I decided to start a PhD there in Seville as well. It was more focused on research about synaptic vesicle proteins, a lot of biochemistry, molecular biology, cell biology. And at the end of the PhD, I was certain that I was going to become a PI, right? As you can hear over and over. And so I just tried to organize my life to get that objective, right? So I started a postdoc in New York, in the Rockefeller University. I moved to a different area because I was passionate about acoustics, music, and all that stuff, and I was looking for research related to hearing or listening, and then molecular biology. That's weird. So there were not so many labs, but I was lucky that I found one in Jim Huspett's lab in Rockefeller. And I was there studying something completely different and new for me, which was nanobiophysics of the hair cells in the inner ear, and some electrophysiology. I was there for 3 years, and after that, I realized that I loved what I was doing and what I was studying, but I was not really robust enough, especially in terms of techniques and papers as well. So I moved to the other side of the States, to California, to start a second postdoc with Tony Ritchie, who was a researcher in Stanford University. And they were more focused on the synaptic part of the hearing, right? So how these cells in the inner ear can transfer that information to the brain through the auditory nerve. So I was doing there basically electrophysiology. So I mastered some confocal microscopy techniques and electrophysiological techniques. And then after that, I was ready to start my own lab, and I was there for almost 7 years with my wife, and we thought that it was time to go back to our country, because we were clear that we wanted to live in Spain, and probably I don't know if it happens to many people, but I had that that feeling of I want to transfer all the knowledge that I got during these years abroad to the society that paid all my education, right? And I really wanted to do that. The problem was that the situation was not great in Spain at the time. Well, and it's not great now either. But I wasn't lucky finding a job. It's just that. I mean, I started applying for jobs sometime before I left the States, and I was not lucky. That's it. So I looked for jobs all over the country with no luck whatsoever, and at the end, well, I found myself back in Spain, happy with family, happy with my colleagues and the people that I loved, but with no jobs. So I was unemployed for around 1 year in the country, looking for positions, but it wasn't, especially because I was studying something that was not very popular in the labs in my country, and that's something that you have to think ahead. It's fine to pursue or to look for what you really want in terms of research objectives, but you have to take in mind that there are not so many labs doing that everywhere, and in the end I found that, well, I organized all my life to become a PI, and that didn't happen. So in the end, it was difficult to do something else slightly different, right? Because that was my only plan in life all over the years. So in the end, I found something for a short time in Murcia, the city where I was living, and after that, I got another postdoc in the Universidad Miguel Hernández in Elche, Alicante. And there it was fine. I mean, I finally got something that was interesting for me, because they needed an electrophysiologist, but the area was completely different. They were studying diabetes, right? But well, I joined the lab, and actually I was there for 3 years, and it was fine. I was lucky that I found something like that, because the lab was very good. The boss was great. The colleagues fantastic. But something happened to me that I think happens a lot. I would wake up in the morning every day saying, Manolo, again, you have to go to work. And that's something that happens from time to time. But if it happens every day, that's a problem. That's an alarm there in your brain saying, hey, Manolo, you should do something, right? And because I don't know, there are people that can do that, but I cannot conceive my life as a researcher with quite a lot of passion, because being a researcher is not easy on a daily basis. You have to be fighting all the time. So you really need to have that drive. And I was losing that drive. So I started doing what people do after many years in academia, asking people, hey, what can I do different to what I've been doing for 15 years? Is there something for me as a researcher or as a PhD? And what's the message that you receive in the university when you ask this? Well, that probably changes a lot depending on where you are living, or your country, or your city, or the university or group. But the message was very, very extremely negative, like pathetic. The message of my colleagues was, Manolo, you're screwed. There's nothing here. Go to the Netherlands. Here what it is, right? So it was frustrating at the time, because after so much effort, you found yourself as something that is irrelevant to your society, and that's tough. So I started asking, but no good replies were were coming. So I had an idea, and there was a radio in the campus because it's a very small campus, and I went there and asked, hey, can I start or launch a new program in the radio? You know, it's a radio for students and all that. And they said, yeah, go ahead. So I launched a radio program doing probably exactly what you're doing today, Natalia, asking people that left academia what they are doing and how you do that. So it was really the big change in my life. I mean, I had been doing things on my own during that time and before, but at that time I was certain that I needed that information. And after 70 or whatever interviews or calls or programs, I realized that the bottleneck was myself. I mean, I was the bottleneck. I did not have the information. So it's not just that I didn't have the information, but there was not such so much information. I mean, right now we have more information, okay? But I was talking about 2007, 16, 17, and we didn't have so much info there. So I decided to launch a website and some social networks, which is called now Carreras Científicas Alternativas, with the idea of finding if there was a community out there in Spain or in South America that were thinking about this. I mean, at that time I felt like I was very, very strange and weird, but I was not mad. So something was happening, and there was a community there, and I found that people connected with me, started following the programs and the social networks, and that was like the seed of what I became. And I'm talking too much, Natalia. I don't know. You asked me about the blogs of my career, and I think I'm still in the first block.
I have to say, well, you have the whole life to live. So I believe it's still the beginning, and that's how I like to think about myself too. Well, I have to say that I feel for you because I also didn't really have a plan B. You know, I used to leave this Arnold Schwarzenegger strategy. I don't know if you've ever read this book, The Total Recall, his
No,
autobiography, but
no.
that's his motto. His life motto is no plan B. So if you do something, do it 100%. There is no plan, for failure. There is only, you're only going for the win, not for the not for the tie. So so I was the same, and I didn't really have any plan B. And then I got lost after, like, I felt lost after my contract expired, like, completely. I didn't really think ever about any alternatives. So and I had this assumption that I will be fine no matter what, because I was always told good education is all you need, and then you're valuable, and that you can just worry later. Just worry later, like, you can always postpone that part. Just do your, like, develop your career, and if you need a job, you just find it. And that's what I was being told by everybody else, like my parents, my friends,
Yeah,
my bosses, everybody around me. And then I figured that no, it's not the case, because there is also a big difference between a job and a good job. Just to find any job that is not necessarily your dream career, it's not a big deal. But to
yeah,
find one where you really think that you develop yourself best, and you develop yourself to your full potential, and basically hits all the marks on your list of what you expect from a dream job, then that's a very hard one. So yeah, I totally, I am on the same page. I had exactly the same feeling at the end of my PhD. Okay, so
I mean,
great to hear about your initiative. I can see that we think alike, so that's really nice to know. So, since I'm not that familiar with the job market for PhDs in Spain, could you tell us a little bit more about that? So, what are the most common directions where PhD graduates in Spain usually choose, and how, like we were already briefly talking about this before, what do you think are the main differences between the job market for PhDs in different countries? Since I'm most familiar with the Dutch market, but I am also, of course, communicating with PhDs elsewhere, and there is the strong community of American PhDs and Canadian PhDs. So and British as well. So I think I'm quite familiar with those markets, but not necessarily with the Spanish. And I'm curious what you would have to
Yeah.
say on this.
Well, I think that it really varies. It's quite different, I think. It would be nice to meet together one day, one of each country, talking about this, because the reality is different, but you never know the nuances and the small details, right? I wouldn't say that there is a PhD market in Spain. There isn't such a thing. And when I say Spain, I would say the south of Europe and South America as well. PhDs are meant to do research. I mean, it depends. I mean, there are people that start a PhD just to to improve their professional skills or to get some more impact in their professional activity. But I would say that most of people that start a PhD is because they want to become a researcher. So the market would be aligned to a research market, an R&D market, and the R&D market in Spain is not terrific. I mean, there are things, but if you compare the kind of the number of companies, the industries, the jobs here and in other countries of North European countries, it's dramatically different. And that's one thing. The other thing is what we think of the job market when we are in academia. And that's also a big problem, because right now, at least in Spain, there is a huge distance between what happens in academia and what happens in the private sector. I mean, there are two worlds that don't speak each other. I'm exaggerating, okay, but in general, people that live in academia, they know about research in academia, but they don't really have information about what's going on outside. And on the other side, in many companies, they see some people in academia, or some researchers or professors in universities, as people that are not really connected to reality. And that's a cliche, but that's a real cliche. I mean, that happens. And because of that, it's not obvious to find a person working in a company looking forward to get a PhD as an employer, as an employee. So that's why there are certain typologies of jobs that are perfect for a PhD, and sometimes a PhD is required, but that's rare. I mean, that's not so common, I would say. So my advice for people working or studying in the south of Europe would say, don't pay that much attention to your PhD. Pay attention to the skills that you got during your PhD. But just having a piece of paper saying that you're a PhD, people don't know what a PhD is or means, right? Especially when you say, you kind of say PhD. Here in Spain, you don't. I mean, people outside academia mostly don't understand what's that PhD thing after your name. That's weird. And if you say that you are a doctor, then you work in a hospital. So, and there's nothing in between. So there's a lot of disconnection between the value that a person with a PhD can bring to a company and the desire of a company of bringing a PhD. I know that it's a very negative perspective, but I want to be realistic, to be honest.
Well, that's true actually, that most recruiters don't know what PhD is, or even if they know, then they only know like from, Wikipedia, they don't know from like real life. So they don't have a grasp on what it entails. And indeed, like almost no recruiters have PhD. So I barely have like know any candidate like PhD graduates who work in recruitment. I know like literally one person who holds a PhD and who works for a recruitment company here in the Netherlands. So
Ah,
it's very underrepresented group
yeah.
among recruiters. That's also why I believe. And there's always this inertia in society where like you first have like the like mentality changes slowly. So and now there is a big inflow of PhDs into the market because there was a rapid growth in the PhD positions in the like in the scope of the last 10 years.
Mhm.
And the amount of PhD graduates in the Netherlands, for instance, grew by over 40% within the last 10 years. So it's actually rapid growth. Uh, that also prompts many PhDs to look for jobs elsewhere because there is just not enough space in academia. But the job market is not adapting as quickly. Like mentality doesn't adapt as quickly. So recruiters don't really conform to this. Like they don't learn about this new like group, that new tribe that comes in that has a bit different culture, and like so there is a clash of cultures, and it actually takes much longer to adapt between the two and to find a good language and good communication and to actually merge together. So that's also true that in
Yeah.
sociology that these changes happen very slowly.
Mhm.
Okay, so what do you think? So can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in your project and
Okay, well, I have to talk about the second part of the story, because after a few years working as a consultant or a career consultant, um, something started happening to me. I got a huge network of very valued people and professionals more related to PhD. Well, I mean to scientists in general, but I would say that mainly PhDs in the STEMs probably. Um, and some colleagues would ask me, "Hey Manolo, do you know a person that?" And they would ask a very strange profile, like something that knows about neuroscience, but likes sales and things that are not common. And I did know that person, right? So I realized that there was a potential there after so much time. If you really like to talk to people and to communicate, that's a strong value. Just having a big network and knowing how to how to be a networker, that's a value by itself. And I said to myself, hey Manolo, maybe it makes sense to do this. I mean, to be a kind of a recruiter, um, to connect these two worlds that are basically disconnected, right? The few companies that want a researcher or scientists, and the scientists that don't want to do research, especially in academia, and want to do something else. At that time, I had no idea about how to do that. I mean, can I do that? I was restarting the whole process, right? Uh, but then in those moments you realize how important it is to have a PhD, because it's not trivial. I mean, you really the learning curve of a PhD is just like this. I mean, you if you want to do something, you do it. You have the tools to solve something and to find an objective and get it. So I just started to learn how to become a recruiter, right from the scratch. Uh, Probably I didn't do what I should have done, and like the prototypical paths to become a recruiter in an easy way. But I was happy with life and with my experience as a career consultant, and I wanted to do something on my own. I mean, I had discovered this entrepreneurial spirit that I had no idea that I had, and I decided to create Talento Científico, which would become a selection boutique for this kind of scientific technical profiles. And I started with that little by little, learning by myself and talking to a lot of people. And at the beginning, I had my doubts, especially because of the apparent lack of positions in the market here in Spain. But with the time, I realized that it's absolutely possible and that there is a market. The point is how you enter in that market, and that had a completely different nature of, I mean, in relation to what I had done with Carreras Científicas Alternativas or things that I did before. I realized that it worked completely different. You find the clients in a completely different way, and you have to learn slowly how to do that. Right? So right now I can, well, I'm not working alone, but I can split my day with activity related to consultancy and activity related to recruitment. And I don't know if I mean, I can tell you whatever you want. Probably there are many questions to be asked here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, actually, I have to say that indeed, from what I know, to become a recruiter, you don't really have to have any formal training, which is so. This is one of the
That's
the
nice.
types of professions, similarly to actually career coach, similarly to many others, like for instance, to work in intellectual property, like in patent law, you don't have to have any formal training. There are lots of professional white collar professions like this, in fact, which is for the good and for the bad. So you like on the one hand, the barriers to entry are low, so you can, if you have clients interested, then you can start right away. But on the other hand, there are also lots of random people in the space. That's also the case because, like recruitment, let's be real, like private recruitment is quite profitable, and the barriers of to entry are low. So that always attracts a lot of people willing to actually work in the space. And I see it here in the Netherlands happening, that there is quite a lot of random people in recruitment
Yeah.
also. So it's
I mean,
but I can tell. I mean, for a PhD, well, if you start from scratch, you have these mental schemes. You know how, like um, how to decompose a problem into smaller pieces and then approach it like piece by piece. So how to figure out what you need, all the things you need to start recruiting. And I can imagine. But I would like to learn a little bit more about this process. So, what steps you took
yeah.
to
I mean,
uh, to start? Yeah.
yeah, probably the 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 basis of becoming a recruiter is that you really have to try it and find if you really enjoy it. Because I wouldn't say that is an easy career, right? I mean, what's an easy career? Probably same as research, but in reality, I find a lot of difference between, for example, an American approach to recruiting and what happens here in Spain in terms of how the recruitment process is, how the market is, right? So if you enter in a market where there are very few positions and a lot of people waiting for the position, that's not the greatest scenario for a researcher or for a headhunter. It would be more related to, a small company of hiring. Okay, you can do that, but I don't think that, at least in Spain, many people approach the a career as a recruiter from an economical point of view, because it's not that obvious that you're going to get a lot of money doing that in Spain. Um, but on the other hand, something that I love about recruitment or about headhunting is the freedom, your freedom, right? And as you said, there are not so many careers that you can enter without a diploma, right? But that's changing. I mean, whenever there are many people doing that, the society decides that there will be a new diploma that you are required for getting that. It's like coaching, right? You can become a coach, but now it's not that obvious. Probably people will ask you for a coaching certificate, right? And as far as I know, that doesn't happen with recruitment. It may happen in the future, and I know that there are people that want to create like a system to teach how to recruit, because right now it's quite a mess how you evolve as a recruiter. And so I I mean, I think that I should go back to your own skills when it comes to decide I want to become a recruiter. And I don't think that having a PhD was important for me to decide that. I would say that, you know, I usually work with my clients as a counselor about your own skills, right? Your self knowledge, your soft skills, your technical skills, your values, your interests in life, and you really need to know all that to decide what to do in life or in your career. And there are people that want to have a job and then enjoy life besides, right, in parallel, but there are other people that really can only be happy in life with the career that are absolutely interesting, and you feel full with this professional career. I am one of those people, right? I cannot I cannot easily separate my job and my personal life, right? I'm like this. So how to become a recruiter? In my case, it happened because it fit perfectly well with my skills, I would say. But I didn't know that, of course. I didn't know that because I never thought about that possibility. But when I was close to that situation and I started myself doing that just for fun, I said to myself, Manolo, you love to do that. I mean, I really love to find something that is extremely difficult to find and help another person and connect two people for their own benefit. That's like, I mean, you can find that feeling even in sales, but it's a mixture between sales, networking, and researching. Actually, there are researchers or sourcers in 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 the in the recruitment arena. So in my case, I would say I really love to connect people. I really love to talk to people and to know what they need. I have this feeling of I need to help people, and I think that I have the skills necessary to do that. And when you go back to your own life, you have to find what made you different, or what made you happy, or especially proud of some situation, some activity. And in my case, I remember that, for example, things as simple as calling people by phone. I mean, I did that a lot during before my PhD, in my degree, because I remember I created together with another colleagues a little group of bioethics when I was studying biology, and I was for 2 years calling by phone to many people just to organize events, convince people about participating. And I remember at the beginning when you start calling, it's really it's hard. You don't like it. Nobody. I mean, there are not so many people liking telephone calls. But I was get used to that, and I mastered the art of calling by phone. And suddenly, like 25 years later, I found that you really need to do that all the time if you want to be a recruiter. So it's just probably a coincidence of interest of doing that, and whether you really have the skills, technical and soft skills to do that. I don't know if I'm answering to the question, to be honest.
Yeah, actually, I'm curious. How do you deal with this ethical dilemma that arrives when you have two sides of the equation? You have two parties. You have the employers and you have the job hunters, and on like to some extent it's a conflict of interest because the employer wants to have as good value in an employee as possible at as low price as possible, and the job hunter wants the opposite. They want good benefits, and they want to get as much as possible. It's like a school of diplomacy, isn't it? Because you have to make sure that both sides are happy. And what is actually harder for you? Is it harder to take the perspective of the job hunter, or the employer?
Yeah. In my case, I don't think I have that dilemma, but because of how I solve it. It depends on the kind of industry that you're working on, or in the kind of company or um, yeah, company that you work with. In principle, this is quite clear. I mean, this is crystal clear for salaries related to, let's say, jobs that are not that difficult to find. When you know that you have a lot of candidates for an easy fit, let's say, then that's not related to percentages or anything usually. So you know the salary is clear, and that's what they're looking for. So you find the candidate, and that's more direct. When you go to a little more complicated job requirements, and then there are not so many candidates, then what it depends on the recruiter, but usually you get a percentage of the total salary, like annual salary of that person. So typically it depends on how much is the final salary. You earn more or less, right? That's also quite typical. Actually, take into account that there are still many recruiters that only get the money due to their job after the end of the process, when the employer and the employee sign the contract. So it's still quite probable that you work for nothing. And that's something that is changing in the industry, but there are still people working like that. So in my case, I talk about all this at the very beginning with the company.
Mm-hmm.
So even before we make the contract and we decide to go ahead, I have several conversations with people in the industry. I talk to people that I know, to have a feeling. I mean, you always know a range of salary that is okay, right? But then it's your job as a researcher / recruiter to find what should be the proper salary. And in my case, I have this conversation with the company, with the employer before, to understand the expectatives, and to understand if they know what they want, what they look for, because I'm not going to find something that is not possible to find. And so in that case, I wouldn't say it's a problem in terms of your relationship with the company. If you do so at the beginning, right? Actually, you need to know what's the range of the salary that they are prepared to offer. And if you find a candidate that is likely to look to ask for a higher salary, you need to know whether you can proceed and talk to that person or not. You have to talk about this with the company before going ahead with the job. And on the other side, what happens usually is that when you talk to a candidate, many candidates complain about the lack of information about salary, right? And it's true, but it depends, because as a recruiter, I want to know what's your salary range expectation to be sure that whether it makes sense to talk to you or not. So if you do so, sometimes, I mean, if you raise this question at the beginning with a candidate, sometimes it's weird because the candidates say, why are you asking me a range of salary even though we have not talked about anything, right? And so in that case, you usually leave to the end of the process the story about the salary. But that's the advantage of having an external recruiter, which is not part of the company. I can have this kind of conversations just to be sure that I'm not going to waste nobody's time. And so in reality, I don't really care about how much the company is going to offer finally to the candidate. I'm more concerned about be sure that I know and that I have discussed the range with the company, and I can sometimes use that information to be sure whether the candidate is a good candidate or not, and just to go ahead or not making waste her or his time.
Okay, but could you maybe tell us a little bit about advice that you might give to PhD graduates who are now looking for jobs in industry? Something that you learned in your practice that you think are effective strategies for job interviews and for writing motivational letters as well.
Well, I mean, it's tough in a few minutes. I would say that probably the main advice would be know yourself very well. Because if you really know yourself a lot, and if you ask for help trying to find who you are exactly, but deeply in terms of skills, interests, values, etc., it's likely that a conversation in an interview is going to be smooth. Because what a recruiter wants is to understand exactly how you are, to find if the combination of how you are and your skills fit the position. So you really need to know that information and to be ready to convey all that information and to communicate all that. But before communicating how you are, you really need to know how you are, and that's not obvious. There are people that just don't know exactly how to communicate how they are. There are many things that you have to take into account, of course, but I would say that would be the main one, I would say. Another is being sure about the position. I mean, having information about the position and understand whether you are the person or not. One of the big caveats of having a PhD is that you're like PhD centered, and you tend to think that your PhD is something very important for everything. And in many occasions, it's absolutely irrelevant to the recruiter. So, but you need to understand whether a PhD for that position is important or not. And if it's not, then it's not a question of talking about a lot about your PhD, but about probably the skills that you obtain during your PhD and outside your PhD. And so if we are talking about PhDs in general, I would say probably you should deviate the attention from your PhD and center the attention or focus the attention on yourself, on your skills. Some would be technical skills, some others will not be technical skill. You will have soft skills, transferable skills. That's more important than talking about a PhD, especially when you come across a recruiter that has been working in human resources for forever and don't have a lot of information about, as we said, what a PhD is or what a PhD means.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, actually, if I could add to this, I think it's also important to tell the difference between the skills you have, but you don't are not necessarily willing to use, versus the skills that you have and you are willing to explore on further. Because, like in the PhD, we also learn many skills as tools to reach our goals. For instance, I had to learn how to program in Python, and many people actually have to learn how to code because this is just the tool we need to solve our problem, so to approach research questions and analyze the data, whereas the real goal is to approach some research question and get the results and write the reports out of it. And that's so the research, the research project is the goal, and the programming is only the means to reach that goal. And then if you think about the skill, like it's highly in demand in the job market. But when I ask PhD graduates who can program whether or not they want to program in daily life, if they would like this to be their main activity, at least 50% of them says no. And it's the same with every other skill. For instance, with statistics and mathematics, like many of us like have courses in higher mathematics during the undergrad studies and also in grad school, but we are not necessarily willing to use this skill in our daily jobs. And so there is a big difference between the skills that you have indeed and that are in demand, but you don't necessarily perceive them as your core competencies, versus those that are your core competencies and that you really feel strong about and you're actually willing to use them in your daily practice. So I think
Yeah,
it's actually important distinction, because we often end up with jobs that might be well paid, but are not necessarily making us happy, because we have to put in use the skills that we don't necessarily feel are associated with the activities that we enjoy. That's the point.
yeah. I and there, there's a typical sentence that I hear over and over from people coming from academia, and it's when you ask them, but what do you want to do? Many of them will answer, I wouldn't mind whatever. And that's a big problem in terms of how you approach a new career. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It's not easy to get a great job, and there are many people that have a lot of skills and experience. So I wouldn't say that answering I wouldn't mind to do something is a good approach. I think that you have the responsibility to understand and to find what you really want, and the more specific, the better. Because when you go to the interview, the interviewer just want to know whether you are the person that fit with the requirements of position. So you just tell them if you are the person or not. And in even in during the interview, something that we tend to lose or to forget is that we have to talk the language of the interviewer. And many recruiters are not scientists, and they're used to I mean, they know about a lot about human resources and competences and all that, but you really need to understand what you really have to say so that the person understands what the person wants to know. And in that case, for example, when they ask you something, you can talk about your skills or your experience, but something that is not trivial to explain, but is important to explain, is examples, because a company wants, if possible, a person that has dealt with the problem already, because problems come on a daily basis. You need to solve a problem. Did you have that problem before? If you did it and you solved it, that's fine, you're in. If not, I'm hesitating, because I don't know how you are going to solve this problem. So as you said, you can say that you can code in Python, but from a recruiter perspective, for me, it's more interesting to understand what, in which context you used that code, or why, or what for. So if you explain the whole story as a story, saying we had this situation in the lab, this was the problem, and we needed to code something to solve this problem. Actually, I had to learn this, and this. And after that, we solved this problem. And the take-home message is that if in the future this problem happens, I know how to solve it. Mm-hmm. This message is way more important than just saying that I can code in Python.
Right. Actually, there is this technique called STAR, STAR, that is kind of the approach to answer to this type of questions, which stands for situation, task, approach, and results. Yeah. So there is the whole pipeline that you can actually learn before the interviews, so that if you're asked about practical examples of how you implemented your skills, you can actually use this narrative to
absolutely
to
and there is a fifth step, I would say, which would be, what did you learn during that process?
That's very important. Very very good remark. Yeah. All right. Yeah, it's hard for me to discuss with you, because I actually agree with everything you're saying.
Let's disagree, Natalia. Let's talk about football.
I hate football, so
well, I love football.
Oh, then we can
you
talk.
See?
Yeah, then now you're talking. Yeah. Yeah. So actually, about the self-discovery part, I fully agree. That's also why I wrote a book that is to a large extent focused on self-discovery, and also in the courses I organize for PhDs, the self-discovery part is 50% of the course. So the course is 50% of the self-discovery exercise, and another 50% is information about the job market, because I think to actually get a good match between you and your future job, you have to combine the two 50-50, and only then you have a good result eventually. So I also fully agree with you on that part. Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm just thinking, what else can I actually ask you so that we finally disagree in something? And I can't come up with any examples for now, because I think we come from a very similar place. So we had a similar problem in the past. We didn't have a plan B. And then eventually we ended up with the same mindset and going also in the same direction career-wise as a result. So I think we have like such a similar thinking that it's really hard to disagree. And yeah, and which is interesting, because eventually, because after all, like I spent last 10 years in the Netherlands, whereas you were like elsewhere. You went through US, you came back to Spain, so we were like living apart from each other, and we were quite distant, like geographically, but we had the same problems and we came to the same conclusions, which is again a sign that we live in global village, and actually people actually mentally got much closer these days than it used to be in the past.
Yeah,
which is interesting.
To tell you the truth, I don't. I mean, we're talking about PhDs and scientists, but I think that the problem is all over the world. I mean, probably in the times of our parents, the situation was so different. I mean, the difficulties that they used to cope with were so different in nature of our difficulties, that we still need some time to fit the story of the job market in our lives, right? Probably it's, I mean, it's impossible to have the same thinking when you are close to a war and when you are so far from a war, right? And right now, hopefully, it's happening right now, and we can think of our happiness in life in terms of a professional career. That was not that important like 40 years ago or 50 years ago. That was probably even irrelevant at some point. So I think that we still need some time, but the need of a transformation in life because things are happening that we don't enjoy is all over the world, is in science, in outside science, and it is related to PhDs and any other people. Actually, right now I stopped doing personal consultancy, and I just have like a group of people, kind of a training program, and that's for professional transformation. I mean, I'm not even especially interested in jobs, in the job market, but rather in the process of mental transformation to be happy somewhere else doing something different. Of course, I can combine my knowledge in science and the job market related to STEMs, but the first part of that is what you said. It's more general. It's giving you the opportunity, or one if you want, you have the opportunity to change your life and to be happier. So try to find that thing that makes you happy. And I'm not talking about a job. I'm talking about everything. And the job is only one part of that puzzle, right? But you really need to understand yourself to understand what's the kind of puzzle that you want to create or make up in your life.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm becoming mystical right now.
No, it's a very hard topic because it's not a rocket science. You can't give an algorithm or an equation for a good career switch, and so I think like what works best for me, and I think for most people, is using heuristics and using some key performance indicators that basically uh, you know inform you whether or not you're going in the right direction, because it's always a process. It's never just taking just one isolated decision and then you're done. It's not, especially today when the job market is changing so quickly. It becomes a process. It's no longer just this sole like one decision of, okay, this is
Mhm.
whom I want to be when I grow up, and then sticking to it. So like
Right.
I do much better myself ever since um I just chose my own KPIs that are not necessarily oriented at the social status or even material status, but more well, sense of safety is part of it. So to some extent there is some material component. It must be,
Mhm.
but um but I also use KPIs such as, how interesting my conversations with other people are, because that's what makes my life good. Actually, that's what I enjoy. So if in my career path I experience like higher frequency of really interesting, inspiring conversations with interesting people that I find I can learn from, then I'm happier. So that's actually, then I'm like, okay, I'm going in the right direction. If this frequency drops, then I'm like, okay, I think it's actually I took a wrong turn. I have to get back on the right track. And so I just started using these heuristics and just like observing myself, if I'm if I'm going the right way, instead of thinking of um, career goals as some isolated point somewhere on the map, like a position of a professor, or a company with 10 million turnover, or numbers. So I stopped thinking about titles and numbers, and I started looking at these key performance indicators on a daily basis, and instead
Yeah.
of, yeah, without even knowing what the endpoint is. And I'm much happier this way. So basically evaluating where I'm going day by day, instead of thinking of these big visions, big
Yeah. But
vision.
But because you took the time to discover yourself, so you are creating a life that according to you, not according to a plan that is half yours and half your mother or half your PhD advisor, right? That's necessary, and probably when you really know yourself very well and you know what you want or the possibilities that you could do, the uncertainty in life is lower, and that's a big fear from people in academia, for example, because you know what you have been done for what you have been doing for many years, but you are scared about what to do next if it's something different. But probably because you constructed the whole story with a different base. The base was your diploma or your interest or your career ambition, but you didn't construct your professional career with the base of you in a combination of skills and interests, which is exactly what you're saying, Natalia.
Yeah. Okay, great.
We cannot disagree.
Yeah, we can't disagree. I failed. I feel like, damn, not this time.
I'm sorry about that.
Next time. Right. Okay. Great. So, well, I think we have a lot of really good material so far. So, I think on this note, I'd like to thank you so much, Manolo, for joining us today and for sharing your insights. And for all of you who would like to ask our today's guests more questions, of course, please feel free to reach out to him through LinkedIn. And we also encourage you to post your comments and questions below this episode. And if you would like to get more of this type of content, please subscribe to this channel. That's highly appreciated. And take care, guys. Good luck with everything, and see you next time.
Thank you, Natalia. See you soon.